I'm out in the garage the day after Christmas and playing with a couple of new toys that I got. One of which is this beautiful new welding helmet my sister got me for Christmas. She knew that I was going to be welding a whole lot more, so she got this for me. It's amazing. It's beautiful. Thank you, Rini. It's been fantastic. The viewport is much bigger than the one that I had, which I got from the welding class, so I'm really psyched about that. What I came out here to do was to cut down and weld in a smaller section for the gas inlet on the spare fender that I've got for the Travelall. Somebody had taken a really nice saw and they had cut out the entire fuel inlet port for this fender, and so there's basically just like a big giant hole there, and it didn't have the actual fuel inlet port there. I went to SendCutSend. I got a couple of these blanks cut that fit the hole perfectly. Just spent the morning here welding this in, grinding it down, and getting it smooth and ready to go. And now what I'm doing is basically setting up the intersection. The intersection will look something, it'll basically go inside like that, and that's actually what the hose that goes down to the gas tank will mount to. So what I'm doing is basically setting this part up. I'm going to basically set up this collar, weld it onto the back of this, and then find the center of this and weld it onto the back side of this, and that will give me the port for this thing, and I can actually clean the rest of this fender up and mount it. The other thing I'm going to do is treat the back of this area for rust, and then weld the patch onto the bottom here and get that installed too, and clean up some of the other sections of this fender, because the fender is in great shape. It's actually better than the fender that I've got on the truck. It's just, it looks worse. So I'll treat this for rust and get it completely cleaned up. So in order to get a nice round bend on these pieces, or at least as round as I can get in my incredible metal shop here, I grabbed an old starter which is 4 inches in diameter, welded one end of this strap to it, and then just used that to bend around. I'll clean up that little bend right there in a minute, but this way it doesn't look completely janky, and I'm actually able to form this thing and make it look halfway decent. So here I'm taking the rounded piece and tacking that onto the pre-cut donut. Then I'll put that on the body and test fit everything. This is the piece I'm talking about. This is going to be the piece that goes up and behind this section like that. And then the hose actually mounts to this part here. So that part is now in place. What I've got to do is basically work on the edges, because this thing has a little bit of a wiggle to it. So I've got to knock out the high spots there. So here I'm basically just adjusting, grinding, using the bench grinder, and getting this thing to fit so it's nice and flush with the back side of the fender. I'm just about to the point where I'm going to weld the back plate of this thing in. I've got it ground down to the point where it's nice and smooth. Looks like the inside there's a couple of tack welds in there. That should be fine. I've got marks right here, and so I'm just about to tack this in, and then probably what I'll do is bring it out and test fit it on the truck just to see how it looks, and then go from there. I just decided to tack this in with, I think, 2 welds so that I could go test fit it, and in hindsight I'm very glad I did. All right, so here we are. We've got the piece tacked in. Looks pretty good. Looks like it's going to fit pretty well. The hose entry is all the way down there, and it'll just come right back up here. The only thing I'm going to have to figure out is how I'm going to handle this lip. I think I'm going to have to put in a fillet or something here to go around this to keep it from collecting water somehow, and I'm not sure how I'm going to do that yet. So maybe I'm going to take this off and make a bigger one. I think that's actually what I'm going to wind up doing. I'm going to wind up putting an edge around this and then welding this to that. Because what's happening is the water is going to go in here and sit, and it's going to rust through that immediately. On the original, it looks like this. And so, I mean, water would come in here, but I don't think it wouldn't sit and pool as bad as it does, or it looks like it's going to do in that one. So, yeah, just rethinking this. One of the smartest things I did was to have multiple blanks cut at the same time and sent to me. It was only a couple of dollars more, but in the long run, it really helped me learn from my mistakes quickly and fix things fast. All right, so I've welded a fillet in here. This is new, I just rebent this. And it's tacked in right now, I'm gonna weld it all in, and then I'm gonna take this new plate that I had made and weld that in here so that it's nice and clean and there's a minimum of any sort of space for water to get trapped in this thing, if at all possible. One of the biggest lessons I learned in this project was to try to avoid putting welds on the outside of anything and try to go from the back side, because it's hard to clean up on the front side. I redid this whole thing, as I mentioned earlier, and it's tacked in. Looks really ugly right now. These edges are garbage, and I really need to clean a whole lot of this stuff up. This is going to need a skim coat, but overall, I'm pretty happy with the way this turned out so far. I'm going to have to spend a lot of time with Bondo to clean up the front side of this thing. It looked really crisp earlier, and now it's not so much, and I'm really upset about that. I'm just going around and basically wire wheeled and put some rust converter on these inside welds, and then I'm going to hit the entire thing with weld through primer, or probably etching primer instead. And I put rust converter all down this channel because I'm not going to be able to take this piece off and clean it all up and put it back on. So that whole channel down there has been liberally coated with rust converter, so I'm going to let that sit and dry. I used a cheapo air cutoff wheel from Harbor Freight to get inside and grind everything down, and it worked pretty well. All right, here's the other side of the fuel inlet area. I've sanded out all of those welds, or I've ground out all those welds and cleaned that stuff up. Next, what I'm going to do is feather this whole area out and then skim this whole thing with some Bondo to get it cleaned up and get it ready to sand down and clean up. But the other thing I'm doing is I'm hitting this whole section with rust converter. I'm going to let this dry, and then I'm going to weld another patch in here to clean this area up here. I'm really learning a lot about how to take my time and work on tack welds slowly and keep things cool. And I think it made a difference on this part of the patch. This part of the patch went a lot smoother. I think it looks a lot better than the part up top, and there's a lot less waviness. All right, so here's where the patch stands now. It's welded in. It's not the most beautiful thing in the world. I had to fill some areas up in the top here. It was getting thin, but I think it'll work for what we're doing here. So I'm going to start cleaning it up with the finer and finer sandpaper and try to get it ready for putty and just basically clean it up. But so far I'm pretty happy with that. Looks pretty good. This new piece is in. It's looking much better now that I drilled out all of those dumb spot welds, and that patch is in place. This is just hung with one bolt, so the panel gaps are really terrible, so don't judge me there. But I'm pretty happy with the way this is turning out so far. We've got a lot of Bondo work to do. I've also got to patch this, and I think there's a very small dent up here in the eyebrow that I got to figure out how to clean up. But I mean, this panel is in much better shape than the one I've got. So I'm going to keep working on this one and see if I can get it cleaned up. I spent the couple hours in the afternoon here sanding a lot of the paint off of this thing, and here's where it stands right now. The bottom patch is looking actually really pretty clean. You can't really see any lifts or anything there. It's going to need just one more skim coat, and I think that should be pretty good. This is going to need a couple more coats. I've got to figure out a way to get the Bondo to lay a little bit smoother, a little bit creamier. So I have to look into that because I'm getting a lot of this kind of texture as far down as I go, and I don't know how to get rid of that. There are some bumps, there are some high spots, so I'm going to work on this and get this cleaned up. And then I want to go around the inside here so that this edge is really nice and clean. I took a wire wheel and wire wheeled off pretty much the whole top layer of paint here, and you can see there are some imperfections here that I'm going to have to sand out. I'm going to try to spend a lot of time getting this thing sanded out. And then as I got to the front here, you know, I came up against some damage and stuff. Somebody had popped this out with a slap hammer, so I'll have to probably hammer and dolly this. I've got to get this out. And there's a couple of ripples and things here. Not surprising for a Fender that's, you know, 50 plus 60 years old. You can also see there's a divot right there. So this is going to take a whole lot more work. It is like 40 degrees out right now, so I can't do a ton of work with any sort of mixables, any kind of epoxies or anything like that right now. So I'm sort of at a standstill until I get another warmer day. And then the other thing I'm going to have to do is cut this area out, a little tiny patch there, and then a little tiny patch there. This is also backed up by the, there's another panel that basically runs down this whole section. So I can't get to the back side of this, but I can at least cut this part out and clean that up. And then the other thing I did was took a wire wheel and wire wheeled out all of the surface rust and hit it with rust encapsulator and tried to clean all that stuff up just to try to get it treated. I'll probably have to go back over this and hit it with another coat because there's no way I'm going to be able to get in here and, you know, wire wheel that stuff out. I'm toying with the idea of getting all of this stuff off, scraping all of this undercoating off. But I also kind of feel like it's done its job for 60 years, so why take it off now? So yeah, that's where we stand at this point.